Hey, this is D Knight,
This is Ty.
and Carol is tending to her husband who fell off a ladder and broke his hand. Ha ha! And you're listening to the part of the and you're listening to the part of the Insurrection podcast where we're not being paid by Russian agents to tell you disinformation and spread lies and rumors and misinformation. Yeah, obviously, it's been just one of those weeks where it's nonstop information. Uh, just the deluge of insanity on and on. Trump admitting on stage that he sexually assaulted a woman. He's been doing so since 1979. Extraordinarily strange. And in a conversation about the instances surrounding the E. Jean Carroll case, that was extraordinarily weird. Yeah. Also, so his criminal sentencing for the 34 felonies in New York that got postponed to November. Not out of some kind of it's not Judge Merchan in that instance, you know, going out of his way to help Trump. It's just unfortunate set of circumstances here with what the Supreme Court did, uh, intervening in Trump's criminal cases, creating new law from scratch that touched all of Trump's criminal cases somehow, even ones that had nothing to do with his time in office, and that presented a situation where we're at the point where Judge Merchan had to make a ruling about whether or not the information used in the trial uh, affected the trial in any way, and also handled the sentencing. And then because Alvin Bragg didn't just fight for a more coherent time frame in terms of Trump getting sentenced, Merchan was just like, "Hey, we got to do this, this, and this." And it's also possible that this will likely set up Trump for an appeal. I'm just going to schedule the sentencing for this date. Just so happens to be a week after the election. Is what it is, or a couple weeks. Um, don't make too much of that. Like in all likelihood, I think if Merchan wasn't planning on sentencing Trump to prison time, that there wouldn't have been a delay because there wouldn't have been any issues to haggle over
Yeah.
or to have
That's what
him.
somebody had mentioned, and because that didn't cross my mind, and I go, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
One, I
obviously,
think that Merchan is pretty confident that Trump's going to lose, and
uh,
he's
I
pretty
don't.
confident that he's going to jail.
I
So,
don't think Merchan's making any decisions based on whether or not Trump will or won't win the election. I think it's just, it's
well, that's
Trump's lawyers engaging in these delay tactics that have been extraordinarily successful in moving things closer and closer to the election, and then arguing that, hey, this stuff is happening near the election, it's to affect the election when really they're the cause of the delay. But again, it's just one instance that happened to help Trump and to a small degree. But again, obviously, the fact that the sentencing hanging over him still isn't good. So I wouldn't really make
yeah.
too much out of it. It's
Well,
unfortunate, but we always
but
knew.
now they're whining because it's delayed. I mean, Sean Hannity was they need to send it to him because the wind was taken out of their sails as far as election. It's like every
Well,
argument
yes. No matter
is
what happened, they were going to complain. It's always a strategy of heads you win, tails I, well, yeah, tails I lose in this regard. Where it's bad faith arguments. If Judge Merchan had sentenced him, they'd be complaining. If he doesn't sentence him, they're complaining about that. Like, there's
Trump wants to be sentenced. He wants to be sentenced so he can appeal the sentence and then he can raise more money.
yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Obviously, anything that would seemingly hurt Trump's chances of maintaining his freedom would be good for his finances in terms of giving him something to complain about and fundraise off of. So you take that away. I mean, I guess in terms of whether this is a help or hurt to Trump, it's a wash. But beyond that, so last week you may not have heard a couple of Russians who worked for RT were indicted by the Department of Justice for funding a right wing media outlet that's actually founded here in Nashville, Tennessee. Ty, you take it away.
Right? Tim Fool. Two Russian state media employees were charged with conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act and money laundering after funneling $10 million to a Tennessee based online media company, later identified to be Tenet Media. That number represents almost 90% of their bank
All
deposits.
right, little inside baseball here. So I wrote up some notes on this real quick, and I spelled funneling, funnel
I knew what you
wrong.
were saying. I didn't.
And
I could have
just
done
in
a
case you
Trump
were like
because Trump
wondering
would have
what
read
that
it
was,
fun
yeah,
along.
funnel and funnel along money. Yeah, in case you were wondering about that FaceTime ad. All right, Ty, continue.
Tenet Media launched as a self-described network of heterodox commentators that focus on Western political and cultural issues, featuring 6 right-wing prominent media personalities, including Tim Pool, formerly of Vice Media, Benny Johnson, formerly of BuzzFeed, Dave Rubin, formerly of the formerly Progressive Network, The Young Turks, Laura Southern, Taylor Hanson,
We'll talk
Matt
about them just
Christensen.
real quickly. Like, so there's always this situation where it seems like these left leaning, quote unquote, progressive networks end up going so far left that they veer into the same sorts of disinformation the right wing networks and media outlets, quote unquote, veer into. That's by design. That's not a coincidence. That happens for a reason because, as you can see, Tim Pool worked for Vice, Benny Johnson, BuzzFeed. Just like it's not a coincidence that these former seemingly left wing media outlet employees ended up in right wing disinformation circles. But yeah, continue. Sorry.
Prosecutors said the 2 RT Russia TV Today, I'm sorry, there we go, Russia Today employees and the 2 Tenet founders began soliciting 2 commentators for work on behalf of an Edward Gregorian around February 2023. One of the personalities said he would need $5 million annually for him to be interested in creating videos for the fake persona Gregorian. The other, identified, needed $100,000 per weekly episode to make it worth his while, according to the indictments.
Yeah, this is funny. So, in the setting up of this media outlet, like they were basically funded by Russia from the beginning. They went in and like approached all these right wing nut jobs that you may know from Twitter, if that's the social media platform you use the most, like Tim Pool, obviously. Dave Rubin featured prominently. Benny Johnson, he's a fucking moron. I mean, he's Tim Pool is a moron, but Benny Johnson is like the dumbest of dumb. He has like a thin veneer of intelligence and sophistication, which just makes his content seem even
Well,
worse.
that is the one thing that he has over Tim Pool, because Tim Pool just
Doesn't
looks
even
like a
have the
fool.
veneer. Yo,
And
he
he
looks
looks
dumb.
like a clown. Benny Johnson, at least like you look at Benny Johnson's profile picture, he kind of reminds me of Colin Rugg a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know, what he presents himself
yeah.
as. And so, like, when you're looking at it, he, like you said, it's a
It
thin veneer of some sort of a little
sophistication until he
bit
opens his mouth.
sophistication and an
Yeah, it's not
intellect.
great. The founders basically got in touch with these guys from RT, got this money to go recruit these guys, and like when Tim Pool started asking, hey, where's this money coming from? Like the Russians made up this guy Edward Gregorian in like in emails back and forth. They're like, he was working for this finance company or something. They were spelling the name wrong in the emails, and I'm like, this is just like clearly an op. And like, so the founders clearly knew this. I mean, at one point they were supposed to have a meeting. I think it was like supposedly 7, 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And when the guys didn't show up, they started Googling time in Russia. And it was like, oh, it's 4 o'clock. They're probably asleep. It's like all this incriminating information in the indictment to suggest that, the founders, Chin and Donovan, knew that they were, basically acting as Russian stooges and probably
Yeah.
acting illegally. But they haven't been indicted yet. But we'll continue on. Uh, Ty, after you.
In one instance, the Russian funders directly asked Chin in late March 23 to blame Ukraine and the United States for a terrorist attack on a concert hall outside of Moscow that killed more than 130 people. ISIS took immediate responsibility for the attack, but Vladimir Putin insisted Ukraine had a role in the massacre. Kiev denied any role in the massacre. Prosecutors said Tenet's founders admitted to each other in their private communications that their investors, quote unquote, were in truth and in fact the Russians. At one point, Chen searched for time in Moscow on Google while awaiting a response to a message.
Yeah, they were clearly aware of what the deal was, like to the point where their private communications are extraordinarily revealing. And in case you were wondering if like these Russia Today guys who were running this operation to infect tenant media were successful, I mean, like the host would argue that they had complete editorial control, but then on the other hand, you have numerous clips like
And they
this.
know it. But I don't know that it matters anymore. This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine. They are expanding this war. Now, don't get me wrong. I know you've got criminal elements of the U.S. government pushing them and guiding them and telling them what to do. Ukraine is now accused, a German warrant issued for blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, in triggering this conflict. Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and to the world. We should rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support, and we should apologize to Russia.
Yeah, sounds like straight out of the can Russian propaganda to me. Now they weren't
Right?
necessarily so successful in getting the hosts of these various YouTube channels and Twitter pages or whatsoever to outright spew pro-Russia propaganda, but a lot of the editorial slant was to present information falsely that would at the very least hurt American interests, create chaos or dysfunction or stoke racism, or just in overall likelihood lead to a situation that favors Russia, not by necessarily causing people to believe that Russia's good, but just creating enough strife and division so that they could divide and splinter the nation in terms of just public perception in ways that benefited Russia. Obviously, so they were removed from YouTube not long after the indictment, and since like the company has folded, so it's entirely possible that the $10 million that they've received from Russia over the course of the past year was a large source of their funding, and they probably couldn't function otherwise. And if that's not the case, then it's also likely that given the founders and what appears to be obvious signs of knowledge of guilt, not being indicted, or at least openly, it suggests they might be cooperating with the feds, and they shut down the media organization as part of some kind of arrangement that they have with the FBI. I mean, I would assume they're cooperating. Likely this isn't going to turn into some huge indictment of, say Trump co-conspirators from other potential plots like the fake elector plot on January 6th. But you never know what these guys know because, like, the right wing media propaganda arm, that thing works like as a part of a structure that also includes Republican members of Congress and right wing billionaires, and it's incestuous. So you never know necessarily what an indictment like this could lead to because everything over there is interconnected. Like they accuse us of being paid shills when they're the ones literally taking the money from Russia. It's fucking bananas.
Literally. And I think this is going to go up. The Tim Pools and the Benny Johnsons and Lauren Chins right now they're like it's like the January 6th and the fake electors. They're down here. It goes up. I'm saying it goes all the way to Tucker. I'm saying it goes to Tulsi. It goes to Elon, who promoted Tenet on X-Chan.
Yeah, he was one of their favorite Twitter. I mean, I don't know, co-conspirators. I guess constantly retweeting them and replying to their shit, no matter how absurdly ridiculous it was.
Yep.
And also, so Lauren Chin, it's a bit of an influencer herself. I think she had this job at what was that, Blaze Media. So since the indictment, she's since lost her editorial position over there. It's just, unfortunate for them. That's what you get for being a Russian asset.